Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to BABSConline. Today I will talk about, today on Fan Animation Workshop, I will talk a bit about the process of making fan animations. And yeah, this chat will be family friendly. Always at the work. So, today I will talk a bit about the process to on how to make fan animation. Basically, one of the things I really wanted to do was to tackle pretty much all the steps of the pipeline. So I will cover a project that I've covered a lot. Not only because I'm really proud of that project, but also because it's a pretty recent one. So the process is still very accurate to this day. I will talk about we will talk about the process of the creation of the Fall of Sunset Shimmer. Um, just to start, just a bit of a backstory. The Fall of Sunset Shimmer started back in 2016. Um, I was talking about some ideas, and Webcake was pitching me creation of a project. Well, basically, she wanted to adapt the comic The Fall of Sunset Shimmer, and I was looking at it, and I didn't hate the idea of making something about it, but I felt something was missing, and I was thinking of something that would make it more interesting as an animation, because the comic itself, it felt good reading it as a comic, but as an animation, um, it felt like things were just happening. So one of the things I was talking about, and I was talking about ideas, and on a flight back from BABSCon, actually, I was with a duo cartoonist, and I was talking about ideas, and I was pitching the idea. Well, Princess Celestia doesn't really have friends, so what if we explore a bit more the idea of Sunset? Sunset being trained by Celestia, being told about the importance of friendship from a pony, doesn't really understand that much. So gave some ideas, and one of the things I started working on in that flight, actually on my laptop, was on a script. And that's the very first step when you work in a, well, I say very first step. That's actually after finding ideas. Writing a script for a project is quite interesting. It's not just my it's not just my process, but writing a script, it's in script format. It really helps to set how long an animation will be. This is how you format a script. When you have locations, when you have character introductions, uh, describing how the character would talk, what the character says, description of events, more. You look at all of this, and when you script it like that, actually that's actually what you do with the show. You script it, and you have a good idea just by looking at the number of pages. In this case, 9 pages. get a good idea of how long the animation would be. So when I worked on it, I had a good idea of the length because the actual length of the project ended up being only 2 minutes, 2 minutes away from it. Part of the reason was that I was not expecting the establishing shots and all the silent moments to be that long. You look at this and you get a good idea. And actually, that says 6 draft, and I can actually show how some of the drafts back in the earlier versions were. For example, the establishing shot, or the opening shot, was actually much different. You had Celestia going, "Don't need to be." Then you had Luna just silent. One of the reasons why I wanted Luna to be silent is that her silence told a lot more, and it was kind of weird to follow a project where Luna didn't say a word. Project where a lot, so I think it was fitting. Also, I didn't voice Luna well. So, and the idea was that Celestia would ask, "Do you think there's any chance for an apology?" And well, kind of feels on the nose, but she talks about apologies and trying to talks about trying to fix your mistakes because she's talking to someone she banished herself. It was really on the nose, but I really liked the idea that she was talking to Luna about it. And one of the reason the shot just turned to "I know," because the idea was simply that she would look at Luna, and we already knew it's about Sunset Shimmer, and she just turned to Luna. Talks about knowing what she knows what Luna is thinking. People will. I was thinking, well, the audience will understand what's going on, and I was talking with some people. I was elaborating and was talking about how the scene would play, and a lot of people just thought, well, it's good like that. So a lot of things with the script, a lot of the dialogue. One of the ideas when I was working on it, and was that this was mostly just going to be a conversation with Celestia and Sunset, mostly just arguing about friendship. There's some moments where with silence, but most of it is just most of that time is talking between the two characters, basically talking about how important friendship is, and you realize as it goes on that all the suggestions that Celestia are pretty bad. And I was thinking, well, Celestia is pretty bad at, probably really bad at friendship because, first of all, in the show she asks Twilight to report on what she learned about friendship. And I was thinking, well, you have Celestia asking for Twilight, asks Celeste, she asks Twilight about it, and I was thinking Celestia probably wants to learn out of it as well. And there was a few sequences. The script itself was followed pretty faithfully. Maybe about one of the main differences of how the project ended. Originally, the idea was that Celestia would just go and do say to Twilight, "Well, show her friendship, teach her what you taught me." And I was thinking about that, and that I realized, well, the animation itself tells it pretty well. I was thinking, well, maybe it's a bit too on the nose. And I was thinking, well, it's also not how it happens in Equestria Girls. So that part was just enough. The animation just basically just recreating this as faithfully as I could, but I also had to take some liberties as well because I was not focusing on the same. But yeah, you have a good idea of what the script is. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. I didn't want to put myself to give myself too much trouble. Well, not exactly give myself too much trouble, but I wanted it to be pretty straightforward, very tight. Because if I put too much bloat, I would have a project that would be I would focus the animation on the best parts of it. So yeah, So out of the script, one of the things you do out of the script is usually when you do an animation, you're gonna go with storyboards. I think of storyboards basically just as like a comic book. You have little squares where you have, well, little squares or rectangles with what you see on the screen, what you're gonna see on the screen, what you're gonna see on, you're gonna see happen, description of all the character movement, what the characters are gonna say, and one of the things I didn't do with that is that I didn't go with that first. I went straight to the animatic. The animatic itself usually with basically just an animated storyboard. So what you do is that you basically just scan characters. With that, I had a good idea of what the timing would be like, and I won't play with the sound. It's actually gonna play it at the wrong speed because of Flash just doesn't handle it well. But actually, I won't because copyrighted music. Actually, the temp music I actually used for that project was actually music from Arrival. Mostly just because I was looking at the opening scene of the movie. I really liked how the mood for the. And I was thinking, well, it's about. Actually, I don't want to give too much spoiler, but the main character talking about. Well, she talks about things, but she talks about how she lost her. And you see a bit some montage of what, what her life with her daughter was like. So you look at, you look at that animatic, and you just have the opening shot. And the animatic itself is pretty straightforward. You take very rough renders. You just draw characters. You don't need to draw them very well, but you have to have a good idea of what they're like in this. You have that shot here, for example, pretty straightforward with them. I'm not very specific on what the character is, but I know myself who that character is. The shot with itself here was a bit different in the final one. Instead of facing into you, I decided front one, where Luna, instead of entering the frame like that, she would go behind. That part was not really storyboarded that much. That happens. There's changes that you do when you go with. That shot was entirely cut. Actually, the fact that I did that whole shot in a single one really helped me in the long run. If you look at that shot. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. Like, I already had an idea of what the scene would be like. I have an idea of the timing. And I have an idea of the dialogue as well. So, those shots, the drawing level is not very complex. It's just enough to have a good idea of what the character would be like. For example, this shot ends up being closer to the camera. Not that much of a change in the long run, but you get a good idea of what you're gonna need. All the way, I'm gonna need Alessia from that angle. That shot was also changed, but most of the things in that shot stayed the same. I have some other shots. For example, I'm gonna cover that one. But basically, one surprised by Sunset Shimmer. And no, actually, I don't have any plans with them fighting herds because I haven't played that game yet. Yeah, I don't know material enough to. And yeah, the thing with that animatic is that one thing I really wanted is that I wanted it to be a good idea of what the final product would be like. So the color set, for example, I had layer. This one was basically just an overlay that would basically tint everything blue. So I had a good idea of the tone just by looking at some establishing shots. That one was pretty straightforward as well, and that model was just a very early version of that model as well. That shot was actually the idea of sunset trying to raise the sun came pretty far in the script itself. One of the things I realized at some point was, well, the original script was that instead of having sunset say to Celestia, well, the sun is getting, sunrise is getting late. Instead, she was just saying, well, our class is supposed to be late, so yeah. The idea was that originally, what she's very invested in her classes, so I wanted to publish that idea. And at some point I was thinking, well, maybe she's aspiring to be more than just an A+ student. So the idea of having sunset to think that you could raise the sun was added. You had a couple of other things. Some of the angles are changed because actually one of the things I realized while with working on a project is that Celestia, her rig was pretty heavy because of the crown that she had in the chest plate, which was a 3D model. Because of that, Toon Boom would struggle out rendering it. So I was thinking, well, I need to cut Celestia out of all the shots So one of the things I changed was that a lot of the shots, a lot of shots were from her point of view. It really helped to set what the style of the project was as well, because a lot of it came from how she saw those events. So it would make sense that she wouldn't be in that frame. Oh, actually, there was one thing. There was she was supposed to carry a couple of books in a cart, and I realized too late. Oh, forgot it. But then I realized, well, it makes it for a cleaner frame, so I ended up having Celestia on the other corner. There we go, this shot. I also realized that I needed to change a bit the lighting. Sunset would be shadows, and you have Celestia talking. Since it was her shadow as well, it made the animation for her much easier because I could turn off a lot of the assets, and turning off some of those assets picked up the rent. So a lot of things that stayed the same. And yeah, as you can see, it's very rough as a drawing. You have an idea of what the character look at, and I had a good idea of how they would act because I had the script and I had the directorial like pretty dark actually it's much brighter on my other screen, but you have those shots, for example, which were ended up translating pretty well. Oh yeah, the 3D shot, which I worked on for I don't know how long, because I wanted to have a good idea of the motion. I wanted it to feel right. One of the great things with Flash is that you can actually import video sequences. So if you want to have a good reference, you can import them. One of the bad things though is that some of them won't export properly, but that's Flash limitations. And yeah, that's pretty straightforward. You have all those shots. Yeah, at that time I only had the text because I was trying to get the voice actors to record, and yeah, that happens. But you have the timing of those lines, trying to say those lines to have a good idea of the timing. And actually, yeah, it was 460. Yeah, about 7.5 minutes. A lot of things ended up being longer because I realized, well, a lot of micro moments, for example, the way that the characters would act would be much different, or at least would add a lot of details. One of the shots I want to cover. This shot. So basically, the idea of the shot was that I would transition from this shot, which was set in the present, where you have Celestia looking in the mirror. Then, at the moment where she would touch the mirror, you have basically cut the past. And as you would cut to the past, she would turn and see sunset. And one of the idea was well, at that moment, she's surprised that sunset is dead. Not only because, because in the movie, at that moment, was trying to get the she was trying to get the element of magic. It would shock Celestia, and as a viewer, you'd be shocked to see sunset. But as a viewer, you would be you would understand her, the shock as well, because Celestia is she's not expecting sunset either in the past, because it's supposed to be a very private room. It's supposed to be younger students, and you have a good idea that sunset is. You have a good idea that seeing that sunset is not going to follow all the rules. So you have a good idea of a rebel or rebel vibes. So, and it kind of throws you out of a shock. So you kind of see what Celestia feeling like at that moment. Yeah, that shot was quite interesting because I had all the wanted the mirror to feel kind of like thinking like the mirror and the bricks, but more like feeling a bit more like water, because it's supposed to be a portal, so kind of like water you'd pass through it. So you have all the ripples, you have the reveal of sunset, that scene, that. So what happens next when you actually get to start the animation, which takes a while because I had to do a lot of revisions of the storyboards. There was a lot of things I was not happy with. I got a few shots. I ended up making shots completely out of the actual storyboards, which is not something you should do if you're in the animation industry, but that's one of the great things when you fan project. So you have so here's Toon Boom. Won't go too far into it. It's basically a node-based animation software. So you have all the layers that you have to deal with. So one of the things, for example, is that I didn't animate the camera movement in Toon Boom because I wanted to have lots of control over it in After Effects. In part because of the refraction. Well, reflection. Basically, the reflection of the water. Doing that in Toon Boom could have been done, but I wanted it to be very specific. I couldn't do that in Toon Boom, so I ended up doing it after. So you have that animation, you have the camera movement, you have Celestia moving her head. She turns her head. I want to, and yeah, when you do lip syncing, unlike the anime industry, one of the things you do is that you import a sound and actually use that as a reference. Let's well, this sound. and you get a good idea. Like you have Sunset in the frame. She doesn't move much, but she needs to be there. You have the way that she moves her head. So she really goes, and I wanted to have a good idea of the. I wanted to have a good idea of the shock. So all the eye expression, head movement, and then you have the. There we go. One of the things with her head is that when she moves, she goes with a head movement that goes down, just to try to push a bit further. And as she moves her head, it actually goes a bit down to try to make an arc. And then I play a bit with the neck animation just to get the. One thing is interesting with actually it also applies to 3D animation, but they don't actually look at each other that much. And part of it comes from the fact that you need to actually, as a viewer, you need to see their eyes much better than they need to see, because they're not, they're characters, so they don't matter as much. Could I say that? Doesn't need to be as accurate for them as it needs to be for you as a viewer, to get a good idea of what they feel like, just give it their eyes. You get their shock reaction. And one of the great things with Toon Boom is that you can actually export the layers separately. So when all the animation was done, and it actually took a while, and not only that, but I actually had to redo some of the animation because I was looking at basically how it looked like in preview itself, because I did teaser for the project and I realized the animation was not as good as I wanted. But yeah, all the layers export. You have those write nodes, and those write nodes, they basically just export a sequence of PNGs, which are then imported in After Effects. Let's that thing. Yeah, After Effects not only eats a lot of RAM, but it eats a lot of hard drive. So let's actually empty it first. One thing to note as well is the colors. I could have done some of the colors directly in Toon Boom, but it wouldn't look as good. So I basically did the shading in After Effects, and I did some guess of how it would look like in Toon Boom. Basically, I had a good idea of what I wanted as the look. So let's preview it as a quarter rent. Yeah, it's pretty slow. You have to preview it first and take guesses. Unlike when you do animation with Toon Boom, pretty straightforward. Might not be in real time the first time around, but the second time it's good. But pretty close. So yeah, good idea of what you want. And you cannot hear it, but my computer fan started on my side. Actually, wonder if I can put a microphone there. Nope. Looks like the noise gate in my microphone just covered it up. Which is pretty good actually. Oh, and one of the things with After Effects, you can preview it with sound, but usually I don't actually get the sound for those scenes. Part of it because it's usually not needed because the lip syncing is already done. So you just need to get the the look right. After Effects, think of it like a Photoshop for video. So if you want to cut out parts, you want to do color correction, you want to blur things, you want to add some effects, you can do all of that and even more. You have some tools now that they added. In Photoshop, you had the spot healing tool brush that basically actually one thing I could do while it loads that one of the things also is the matte painting. One of the things I needed was a background, and the background in the Toon Boom scene is just a preview, just to have a good idea. It doesn't need to be looking very good, but basically the idea was that I needed a corner of the I needed the corners of the mirror. So basically just this. Oh, there we go. So I had that part. I had the back plate. Oh, and the funny thing is that if you look here, the part background, what I did, I didn't want to spend too much time on that because it was just a part that it would be blurred and you wouldn't see too much. But the background is just pre-production render that I had of the hallway. So I just took the render. I took out one of the characters that was already there because I put sunset in to test how it would look like. So I just used the spot healing tool brush, and I didn't care too much about that part. So then you had the volumetrics, which is basically just me smudging some colors, and then you had the reflection, which doesn't even match because it was just flat colors in the back in the 3D render that I used. So I had that part. Then you had the front, and that's all the layers that I put. And then I put them all in After Effects. And actually, that part is not even the render speed because it's just a quarter of the pixels. And I say quarter, but a quarter vertically, a quarter horizontally. So it's 16 times less pixels. And for that render, which yeah, that's the equivalent 480p, which 480p is basically the quality you'd get out of YouTube back before they added HD. So back then, if I did an animation for that time, I could have just used that render time and added a lot more effects. But then again, my computer wouldn't have been powerful enough to add more effects. So, you know, the project itself was done in 4K, and you're gonna think, well, if it's done in 4K, you're gonna, well, you're gonna have 8K and then 16. Okay, because details. But the fact that the resolution increases means that the render time increases, but then the computer power increases as well. Like I'm using an old computer, still fine, but those that processing power that increases over time, it gives you a good idea of all the things that you can. Actually, I'm rambling a bit, but I was looking back at some of the older projects I did, like Project Thundercloud. The render times that I had for that project were horrible, and I was thinking, well, I have some shots. Well, back then I had some shots that took like a minute at 1080p. I was thinking, well, it's pretty bad. And then I'm looking at the render times I have for my projects, and it's still pretty bad as well. It's still a minute per frame. Okay, it's almost done rendering. And yeah, that's the reality of working with After Effects. It's gonna be like that. You get those ripples, you have the camera movement, which is done in After Effects by basically just sliding the plate up and down. Then she turns, and then you see sunset shimmer. So you see that scene, and you're gonna think, oh, it's sunset shimmer. Is she evil? And you realize, oh no, you realize at that point, well, it's I'm thinking of her of what she is now instead of what she was before, because I don't realize that scene was set in the past. And one thing is interesting, you can see here that plate, that background plate that I had was production render. Well, actually, I could show you those pre-production renders later, but you don't really see those details. You don't need to worry too much about details that will not really seen anyway. So actually, one of the things I wanted to cover up. There we go. One of the things with the placement map. So one of the things I did was that I pretty crazy. So basically, one of the things I used to get those displacements was this layer. Which is actually a 3D simulation. Basically, I took a plane and I took a cylinder and just pushed it against it. Then I simulated it, and I used that simulation to get some wave like that. Try to wait for them to, and after a while they would just go and fade. Didn't work as well as I wanted, but you actually had some nice waves that really felt like water, and and it's actually normals. So basically, I had a red light that would shine on one side, a blue light that would shine on the other. So what I would need to do after is that I would need to use displacement. So what it's going to do is that it's going to displace pixels according to that map. I actually had two of them to take that depth. So I had one that was all on Celestia, and I had another one that was all on Sunset in the back. And not only that, but I also had the Gaussian blur as well to try to blur it. So you wouldn't see right away. You would think, oh, it's probably part of, you won't notice that detail right away because you're focusing on both. But you're not going to focus on that part right away. Actually, so it kind of blends, and it's pretty, actually one of the pretty cool things with the fact that Sunset was, I'm gonna say it, an orange horse. The fact that she was an orange horse and he had those warm lights in the back would make her blend a bit. And I had to cheat because disable the Gaussian blur. It actually looks like that. I was thinking, okay, not gonna be realistic, but I don't need it because it's a show about horses that talk and talk about friendship a lot. Yeah, I'm thinking. I was not thinking that much about Stargate. I haven't seen it in a long time. I remember it was on TV, but I was not really paying much attention to it. So I don't know. Maybe it's just because of the dub itself, or maybe it's just that I was interested in it. I was a kid. But yeah, the idea was I really wanted it to feel more alive in a way, like the fact that it would ripple like that would actually feel a lot more kinetic than if I had just a plane that you would pass through. And yeah, you get that scene, which. And a lot of it also comes from music. Radiark did an amazing job with that one. Oh, and one thing someone pointed out was that she was looking at her left, and then she turned to sunset. The thing is that she was looking in the mirror, and that's a POV shot. So you look at that shot, and then you think, wait, she's looking at her left, but that doesn't make sense. Like, actually, not only is she on the wrong side, but she's not turning her head to the right side as well. So I was thinking, well, it doesn't that much, but then I realized a bit later, wait, it doesn't need to make sense in a physical way. It needs to make sense as you edit it, because those shots needed to flow together, because you had that shot, so it needs to mirror that shot with that shot. So you immediately realize, oh, it's a different place. Not only because of all the things that are around, different lighting, the fact that Sunset Shimmer is there and she's not wanting to shoot at Celestia in the face. Oh, one thing I noticed later was that I did some mistake with the compositing in that part. Oh, and a funny thing with that shot, when you see Sunset just walking by this, and you have the lighting, and you have her shadow. I wanted to do that part in compositing, and I realized too late. Wait, that's gonna be a nightmare. How do I do that? The solution came much later when you get. Oh yeah, one thing with dividing shots like that. Basically, all the scenes are separated. So you have the opening of a project, you have the final scene, when the breakdown, when Sunset would basically just go away, but you had Sunset Pro shoot light. And hope I am in the right. There we go. So you had that light. So you crank out the exposure. Then you have the light that would come out of Sunset's horn. And actually, that one scene was all a 3D shot. Basically, what I did was that I rendered Sunset Shimmer as a 2D plane. I basically just took the that I had, and I just match moved the point light, get those lights to come out, and then I just added that light right back in the to actually get that. And you all here, I didn't have animation for Celestia ready, so I just took a 3D rig, and it still worked pretty well. And then you have those ripples in the same technique with those normal maps. It actually gives some really interesting look. There's actually an effect in After Effects that does something kind of like that, but the ripples don't bounce corners, so it didn't look as good. Oh, and one thing that's pretty clever is that there's ripples that cover her lighting as well. You'll see her mouth, so I didn't have to lip sync that part. So yeah, it's oh, and to cheat a bit, I added some side light, which is not really accurate. It kind of treats it like it's the kind of part shiny and part diffuse. Really accurate, but just looked much better, and actually gave some depth to the and yeah, let's show you really quick how that works. So just to show you really quick how the displacement map works, it basically takes the basically color information of the thing that is in the back, and it displaces it according to that. It basically, for example, if the pixel is completely red, you're gonna multiply that by the horizontal, just push it. And the reason why you see two sunsets right here is that here, but here it's gonna push it, and yeah, trying to find a right. It's gonna distort it according to those two, so it's gonna get, you're gonna get some kind of weird reflection. So you need to get it, gauge it right, how much you want it to move. So that pixel here, and you can do it in both axes. For example, this one is in, you can actually do it in red, you can do it in blue, can do it well. In this case, since it was a normal map, I could just do it in red and blue and that's it. So you get those effects. You can actually do that as well for ground reflection. For example, you have a ground and you want a reflection that is not completely flat. You want it to have some creases. You can actually just make a checkerboard pattern and use that checkerboard pattern to get some parts that are higher. You can actually get a checkerboard, you can have lines. So you get the so just the creases that will raise it and lower it. Actually, in if you've seen the teaser for the beginning of Harmony, there's one of those things that work. So yeah. Oh, editing. Editing projects can be a bit of a nightmare. One of the things I do usually when I do editing for projects is that instead of editing everything once it's done, it's better to edit everything while it's getting done. So for example, you have this shot here. And you know, it flows well, but the thing is that you're not sure if it's gonna flow well all the time. So one of the things with actually one of the things with Toon Boom is that actually you actually get even that in Flash, although Flash is a bit finicky with that. There we go, preview.mav. You're gonna get a very bad looking preview of that. 404 because the first 100 frames are gonna be already taken. But you're basically gonna edit with something that looks like this. Oh, right, I'm stupid. That's a version without dialogue. There we go. And you're gonna think, well, why would I edit with something that's not finished? And you have the timing because you want that shot to, well, you're gonna think, well, can't I just edit the final shot? And you're gonna think, well, you're gonna say, well, yeah, you can. But the problem is that when you edit with a shot, you're gonna have to gauge how much of a how long the shot is gonna be. it's going to take a while to render those frames, so you want to give yourself, you're going to want to give yourself enough frames, so you're going to get, you're going to get yourself enough frames to know what you're doing, but not too much to not overwhelm yourself, because there's some shots, for example, the shot where you have you have the shot where you have the camera movement around Celestia, which took a while just to do, but also to render, because those frames for the camera, especially the first frames, just the reflection of the metal made it a nightmare to render. So just to get having a good idea of the length of the shot really helped. So at the end, I cut about a second of footage like this, which was actually actually the backplate was actually still moving. And you're gonna think, well, you wasted a second of footage. Yes, I did, but I didn't waste 10 seconds because I didn't know what I was doing. So actually, that goes back to animatic, doing that animatic and doing that, using that to get a good idea of what to do. Also prevented me from making a whole shot and then realizing, well, that shot is, wasteful. I've seen a lot of animators in the fandom. What they're gonna do, what they're gonna do is that they're gonna all animate with the same software. They're gonna just animate in Flash with a single timeline, so nothing goes to waste because all of it just goes. But for a project like this, there's no way I could get it all to fit with just software. Yeah, reflection actually, if you look back, in this case, reflection is basically not even there. The front hoof that actually touches the mirror is a different hoof entirely. I had to do 2 animations, which was kind of tricky because the hoof didn't look too good, but then I realized, wait, it doesn't need to, because there's gonna be a lot of ripples covering it up. So I just had to get that part of the animation done. Oh, and one thing, for example, is just get that perspective. Oh, right there. Oh yeah, the rig just for her hoof. Basically, I just plugged the hoof from the rig to the writing node, so just the hoof would be. And yeah, to get that perspective, basically just a shape that goes with a mask. That's it. Then you just animate it to get that perspective. And then that part that kind of bent is covered by the fact that the frame doesn't look at it anymore. And I was thinking, well, I could fix that, but nobody's gonna see it because it's not in the frame. And yeah, that's one valuable thing when you do an animation. Don't focus on the things that are outside of the frame. Don't focus on the things nobody's gonna see, because yeah, it's not gonna be worth it. Oh, and you can see some funny freeze frames. One of the things that's pretty good is that Celestia moves her head pretty fast, so I could just transition between pretty quickly. Oh, and the tiny detail to animate her chest, just move up and down to give the idea that she was breathing heavily. You don't hear that, but you see it, and kind of helps to set the tone. and you don't need to focus too much on the legs because no at them. Yeah. So that's kind of the way to go with those projects. You also have the camera movement that I talked about earlier. It's mostly just keyframing the whole shot, which is not the best approach for shots like this because it means that I have to get a plate with much heavier plate. Basically, the resolution of the plate is much bigger, and I cut a lot of frames, but that's the way to go. And it's been about an hour. I think I'm gonna go with the last 30 minutes to go with basically community suggested ideas. Basically, I can cover shots that people want to see how I did, and then answer questions. Yeah, I realized too late. Wait, that panel's an hour and a half long. What am I doing? And it's kind of my fault because I applied for an hour and a half. How do I light 2D characters? There's actually a couple of ways. For Celestia, technique is pretty straightforward. So, start with the beauty pass. Basically, go with the beauty pass, and then you have the tint. I basically just took a color of the. I went back to the matte painting, and took just an average color of what the background would look like. Then I tweaked it a bit. So you get that. Add the shine. One of the things with the one of the things with Toon Boom is that you can actually export some layers separately. So you have the shine as a separate element entirely. And the reason why is that it's reflection, so you're gonna get some different colors entirely. So you have a point light that's reflected far away. You're gonna get those dots. And then you get that side. It's pretty straightforward. What you do is that you get basically a blurred version of the rig that's set as alpha inverse. It's kind of like a mask. So what you're gonna get is that then you're gonna just shift it around. For example. So for example, with the angle, it's basically just a cheated technique. It kind of gives some kind of rim light. Then you just move it around for what you want. You can actually do it backwards as well if you want it to be front lighting. There's actually ways that are more efficient to do that, and it doesn't work for all the shots actually, but for shots like that, it's pretty simple because light is from the back. So you get here you get this shape layer. I just cheated and I just made the bottom darker, kind of to draw attention away from the hooves. And then, oh yeah, stand still because the shape layer would just overflow. You take them out, get that. It's not perfect, but you have also other shots. Actually, if you've seen the teaser for the beginning of Harmony, you're gonna see the lighting here. It's actually been drawn on the layers itself with a separate brush and separate brush itself to get the light. Actually, I could open up that shot. Let me Opening. All right. No, it's not. There we go. Oh yeah, I did it the earlier version of After Effects. Actually, before I moved to an SSD. Oh, and actually, you can show a bit how compositing a shot can be like. Actually, what I did was that I did 3D camera movement in Maya, and then I just 3D tracked it. Oh, I'm stupid. When you go full screen in Premiere Pro, it actually breaks it. Okay, let's go at quarter rent. There we go. Oh yeah, stupid me. I accidentally, when I did the rig for Celestia, I forgot to change the name. So it's SS for Sunset Shimmer instead of being FC for Philly Celestia. So start with color just for the back color. The outline is darkened here because I want it to pop a bit more. Here, that's the technique with the shadow mask. What the shadow mask is basically this, which is basically just one of the colors. It's set as red, but I just set it up to white, and I blurred. Then I just set it up as the luma key to get that amount of color. And one of the things is that since it's drawn in the frame, it actually moves with the character. It's not as accurate, but for what I needed, it actually worked pretty well. You get that light. So that one. Oh, I think that one's. Yeah, that one's for later when she turns her head. Because of the door, when the door opens, it actually casts some light on Celestia, so I needed it. And that one was just basically just a technique with shifting the character. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward for that one, but it doesn't work with all the things. For example, light that is very on the side is not gonna work well. That one's. Oh yeah, no, that one is taking. Is basically taking the plastics from the water, which is actually just an animated loop, and basically just adding it on Celestia just to make her to add some just to give the light a bit more personality. That one's for the eyes. Up. I think that one's the shine, which kind of creates a weird outline, but I'm fixing that. Then a bit of just a bit of glow for the light, just eyes, just to make them pop a bit more. That one was just just a tiny amount for the eyes to pop as well. Outline. Yeah, the outline only shows up later. Turn their head. So instead, so you basically get, it's kind of like a rim light, basically just taking the outline and just making it pop a bit. And then I take the beauty to crop the pixels. And there we go. So you get a character with shading. And that doesn't work with Flash, so that's why I recommended to people to move to Toon Boom. Well, not all Toon Boom, because they also have tools for that. I don't really like using them, but they work. Or After Effects. Actually, back when I was on Luna's Determination, that really helped me a lot, because those things really save a lot. But you see that here now. How to make the 2D and 3D stuff fit the style. One of the things I do usually is that I soften the 3D. Basically what I do is that I have yeah, basically what I do is a dose of smart blur. Actually you can see it. If I turn off the smart blur, what it's going to do is that you're going to see a bit, you're kind of lose some of the details, but actually that's pretty helpful, because you look at it now and you compare, you kind of lose some of the graininess of it, and it just gets much better. Using the same kind of colors as well, so you really feel like those lights here, you know, they affect Celestia. There's some reflection here, which was done by just taking some, just doing some displacement. Not very accurate, but tiny detail, and with those tiny details, you don't pay attention too much. The light itself glows, which is not something that light does, but I really wanted to force the look, so I added, made that light glow. The water itself is actually clocked. It actually moves. Not realistic at all, but it actually looks good, so I kept it in. And then I just had to match the movement with the character. Oh, funny thing about that shot. Originally, what I wanted to do was that I wanted to have instead of just transitioning from one shot to the other, the idea was that the the roof itself would be made out of glass, and then I will looking at the architecture and was thinking, well, glass roofs for that would just never work. So I just transitioned from the other, and it goes pretty smoothly from one to the other. So you get that like that, and it's not perfect, but I think it works. And once in a while, you have to realize that you might want something to look one way, but you won't be able to. So you have to have a plan B, and it looks what your vision is. Just go with it, and that's one of the reality of working. And you don't always have plan. So yeah. Other questions? Yeah, that background is 3D. Is actually a Maya scene that I rendered. Really pretty good. Not perfect. There's a few mistakes in there, but since it's pretty dark, you don't pay attention too much to them. And there's a few other things. How to create shading effects for 2D ponies in Flash. Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. You have to go with you basically have to go with basically have to go with After Effects, or you can cheat. It's not a very good technique. Let me show you with. Yeah, I do use Blender once in a while. There we go. So let's. You can actually do it in Flash, but it's not gonna be very effective. Actually, I think they fixed it since then, but it can actually have some drop shadows and actually get inner. You can change distance. Not gonna look very good though, so I don't recommend it. You can actually teach it as well. So the problem with that is that you're gonna get something static. You won't be able to preview it properly. It's one of the things that's broken about Flash. I think there's one way. Oh right, I don't have the Flash detection. Yeah, it's pretty limited. That's one of the reasons why. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I don't use Flash that much anymore. A lot of it comes learning a lot of software. One of the things is that when you learn one animation software, it opens a lot of doors with other animation software. So there's a lot of technique. For example, the way that, for example, timeline, the idea of how to handle a timeline. It's going to be a bit different. For example, the way that timeline works in Flash is different from how in Toon Boom. But, left as past, right as future, that part is still straightforward. Keyframes kind of look the same. Drawings as well. So from one to the other, pretty straightforward. You mostly have to learn how things are different. But otherwise, it's a lot of when you learn one software, you get a lot of knowledge on other software as well. You have to learn the technique as well, because in the industry, they're going to ask you to work with much different software. And if you can't, well, they might go with someone else. That's one of the sad things. One of the things, for example, Celestia's main, it's rigged much differently, but the gist of it is still the same. Basically, one of the things with Celestia's main, a lot of people think is very complex. It's not, kind of. Basically, yeah, actually, let's play in. There we go. So basically, the main itself is just one big shape and a couple of shapes inside. You see those shapes that are actually just a copy of the bottom one with those colors. That part is just the little glow on the side is actually blurred. There we go. And there's this, which is actually just all the colors. You can see a disable the map. You're gonna see how it actually works. It's the same in Flash, so recreating it in Toon Boom is not that complex once you get the gist of it. But you get this, you get the sparkles that are the same as well. And yeah, basically just that loop that just continues forward. Back the cutter, and you get back that main. Yeah, it's the same technique as when I did it in Flash. Not that complex. And it takes a while because it's 80 frames at loop forever. I think in some special shots they're gonna just redraw it, but it's the same loop. Official. Season 1 and 2 they actually only had 40 frames, and then they realized, well, it's not very smooth, so they just added in between. When I learned that, I decided to, well, I had to do those in betweens myself as well. And since I'm kind of part of my style, the main itself goes slower in the shots because I wanted to flow even slower. So yeah, other questions? I only have 10 more minutes before they shut me out. So oh yeah, I want to just as a reminder, I have an animation post-mortem later. It's basically I'm gonna look back at another older animation and on it. Basically talk about the ideas that I had and some of the changes that were made from the original vision, some of the compromises I had to do, and so and so. Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting. I think I'm gonna give. Yeah, I'm gonna give a bit of spoiler. The animation I want to cover this time is Luna's determination, and yeah. Anything Fallout Equestria planned? No, it's a bit too dark. I don't even know that much Fallout itself. Uh, yeah, I don't think it's for me. I will just go with some bigger projects. My Starlight Glimmer project is supposed to be set. Well, it's supposed to be set around season 7 or season 6. Definitely not season 8. A part of it is because of the School of Friendship. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that the pain to model. I was thinking it was kind of clashing with the original vision project. So, and I cannot just ignore it like it doesn't exist. So I think I'm just gonna set it in the past. I think it fits with how the events of the show flow after. Uh, yeah, I think yeah, actually, 9 more minutes. Uh, oh, there's shots for example like this one, or you have Celestia just flying away. It's funny. It's pretty funny because the scene itself is just a tree scene. I had Celestia that I had previously animated. It's very simple. It's basically just a wing cycle. She moves her legs, and that's it. And then I just slid the animation card that it just moved. The shadow was just produced by the fact that it's not even a ray tracer. It's just it's basically just directional light with the shadow map. The back plate in the back is actually just a render. I just rendered what Canterlot would look like at night. I went in Photoshop, I polished it, then I just projected it in a sphere and just left it there. And when there's other shots, for example, like this one, which also use the same render, it's basically just a plate of the moon that moves. Some very, very basic towers in the front. Oh, funny thing, there's one shot, this shot that I had to do on a separate computer. Yeah, the funny story is that I was working in the shot, and then what happened is that the power went out in the whole building, the whole apartment complex. And because of that, we had to evacuate. You had the Red Cross giving us hotel rooms, so I was trying to get to work on that shot on my laptop in a hotel that was far away. So I was trying to get some work done, and I was realizing, well, all of it is my desktop. The power is out. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I was hoping for to find something until I realized that backup of the project had some plates that were rendered. Well, it had the back plate and all the character animation already done. And I realized, well, I can use that and try to composite that shot. I had to download it on very, very slow internet, the hotel Wi-Fi. It was quite a nightmare, and I was thinking, well, I think I deserve a break as well, because coming back home, realizing that the power went out, and realizing that you basically live, you're basically stuck with your school bag, a hotel, like a cheap hotel. They had a pool. It's kind of a shame because I didn't have my suit, but I could have gone to that, and I. Oh, and there was a restaurant. The food was good, but the restaurant was really weird. Yeah, that was a pretty weird time that we had there. Um, got 4 minutes, so I don't know if we have any questions. Oh, yeah, the power outage was bad. The reason why they had to give us hotel rooms is that this was in winter, and the heating was also electric. So yeah, it was pretty weird. Thinking, yeah, we messed up, and now the Red Cross is there of the apartment. I moved out of that apartment complex pretty soon after. Oh, and the power outage was actually caused by the apartment complex, not by the power company. They actually called them, like, we were waiting. It was really painful because we were waiting. We were waiting out. I was actually waiting outside of my apartment because my apartment was too cold. I found, because there was an underground parking. I found that next to the underground parking there was one power outlet that was there. So I plugged my phone in. I was just trying to wait, and I couldn't sleep at all because I tried to sleep with that cold. So I just waited, for news. I went back to my tried to sleep, and then I realized, yeah, if the electricity doesn't come back, not only I can't take a shower, I can't go to work like that. So I had to take a day off, and since I had to take the day off, and I was really angry, I ended up before. Actually, it's pretty crazy, but before the Red Cross came to give us free hotel, I went to the hotel myself. Like I took my car, drove to hotel. Well, I called them first, but basically just asking, "Do you have a room? I need a shower. I need to sleep." It was a really good shower. And yeah, it was what, 3 days out of the apartment, and yeah, it felt good to come back home after that. Like I felt, a wake up call. I needed to move out of that place to something better. And oh, and when I moved out of that apartment in April, it was pretty crazy because it was I moved out in April. There was BABSCon right after, and because of BABSCon was right after, what it meant was that um, I I was thinking it was I lost my passport in my while I was moving out. It was just a few days before BABSCon. I was thinking, what am I gonna do? It's probably gonna cost $400 trying to get a replacement passport. So I really had a panic attack because of that. Yeah, it's one of those crazy things that happen when you hear me. I think the stream is gonna off now. I don't know exactly how it's gonna go. Hopefully, um, yeah, hopefully don't just cut off word. Uh, yeah. On my side, I'm gonna wish you all a good time. Rest of the convention, and I'll see you later with the fan animation